On the night of December 8, 2015, 24-year-old Charlotte Brown, a bright and ambitious business consultant from Clacton, Essex, went on a date that would tragically be her last. Charlotte had met 28-year-old Jack Shepherd, a website designer from Devon, through a dating app. She was at the start of a promising career, known by friends and family for her sensible nature, strong values, and magnetic personality. In contrast, Jack had a reputation as a champagne Casanova, flashy, irresponsible, and drawn to reckless behavior. That evening, Jack tried to impress Charlotte with an extravagant night out. They dined at the Shard, drinking champagne and enjoying the view, before heading to the River Thames where Jack had something unusual planned, a late-night ride in his personal speedboat. The 14-foot Fletcher Aeroflight GTO, which Jack had purchased second-hand via Gumtree, was in poor condition and lacking basic safety features. He had no proper boating license or formal training, and the vessel itself was riddled with mechanical defects, including faulty steering. There were no life jackets on board, and the boat's kill cord, a crucial safety device designed to shut off the engine if the driver is thrown overboard, was not connected. As the couple set off from Hammersmith Bridge, the risks escalated quickly. Jack, having consumed significant amounts of alcohol, drove the boat dangerously fast, reaching speeds between 26 and 34 knots, well above the legal limit for that section of the Thames. Charlotte grew visibly concerned during the ride, sensing that something was not right. Tragically, her fears were well-founded. Near Wandsworth Bridge, the boat struck a submerged log and capsized. Both Charlotte and Jack were thrown into the freezing December waters. Jack was eventually found clinging to the overturned hull, yelling for help, but notably he only called out to save himself, not Charlotte. When rescue teams pulled Charlotte from the river, she was unconscious, her body temperature dangerously low at just 25 ADC due to cold water immersion. Despite resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead. An investigation into the incident revealed the extent of Jack's negligence. Not only was the boat unsafe and unfit for use, but Jack had knowingly put Charlotte in danger by taking her out in the vessel while drunk and without safety precautions. Despite this, instead of facing the consequences, Jack fled the country. He was located months later in Georgia, a move that infuriated the public, especially when it was revealed he had received taxpayer-funded legal aid while on the run. In July 2018, Jack Shepherd was found guilty of manslaughter by gross negligence in his absence. After his extradition from Georgia, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for Charlotte's death, along with an additional 4 years for an unrelated assault. However, in January 2024, Shepherd was released after serving just half of his sentence, sparking renewed anger from Charlotte's family and the wider public. Charlotte's father has remained vocal about the injustice of the case, particularly frustrated by Jack's ongoing claim that Charlotte was steering the boat at the time of the crash, a claim that contradicts witness testimony and evidence. The tragic death of Charlotte Brown has served as a heartbreaking reminder of how reckless behavior and arrogance can lead to irreversible loss. Her family continues to campaign for justice and accountability, refusing to let her memory be overshadowed by Jack Shepherd's lies and evasions. Let's take a moment to appreciate modern comforts like Tylenol, indoor heating, and not getting dumped into a swamp after death. Because today's tale, it's a certified Iron Age horror show. Enter Mora, or, as she's sometimes called, the girl of Uchte Moor, a young woman whose life was basically the ancient version of a non-stop bad day. So, who was she? Mora was a bog body. Yep, you heard right. A bog body, which is basically a human preserved in a peat bog, a kind of super soggy plant matter swamp that's great for naturally mummifying people and not so great for, living. Think of it as history's least relaxing spa treatment. Her remains were discovered in Germany back in the year 2000, and at first people thought she might be a recent missing person, maybe a partygoer who vanished after a night out. But nope, turns out she was over 1,000 years old, hailing from the Iron Age, and was somewhere between 17 and 19 when she died. So, basically still a teen, except her life? Way more brutal than your average high school drama. First off, her skeleton read like a laundry list of pain. Mora's body showed signs of intense physical labor, probably hauling heavy stuff like water jugs through marshy terrain. Basically, CrossFit, but involuntary and way less Instagrammable. But wait, it gets worse. Her skull had 2 massive fractures that had healed, which means she survived a major head injury. Not just a bump, these were serious bone-cracking impacts, likely caused by blunt force trauma. Could have been an attack from outsiders, could have been someone from her own village. Either way, the girl took a hit and lived to tell the tale, though probably with constant headaches and possible neurological symptoms. And as if that weren't enough, Mora also had a benign tumor chilling at the base of her skull. This unwelcome passenger probably messed with her nerves, gave her even more headaches, and caused her spine to curve. Hello, chronic back pain. Her legs? Inflamed to the point that it actually changed the shape of her bones. And all this while still a teenager. Oh, and did we mention she was also malnourished? Her bones showed signs of childhood starvation and illness, likely from cold winters and not enough to eat. Basically, Mora's body was constantly fighting itself and the environment. Every single day must have felt like level 100 in survival mode. Now, as for how she died, there's no evidence she was murdered, which is weirdly the good news here. Most bog bodies show signs of violence or ritual killing, but in Mora's case, it's believed she may have died in a freak accident. That said, there's one odd detail that raises eyebrows. She was found completely naked, with no personal items, no jewelry, nothing, which suggests someone moved or altered her body before dumping her into the bog. Why? We don't know. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was secrecy, or maybe it was just how her community handled death. Either way, it's suspicious. And just when you think her saga couldn't get more depressing, her discovery was a mess. Literally. She wasn't gently unearthed by archaeologists, but accidentally scooped up and shredded by a machine. Her remains had to be pieced together like a 1,000-year-old jigsaw puzzle. Even in death, Mora couldn't catch a break. So, yeah, next time you complain about a tough day, just remember Mora. Iron Age teenager, survivor of blunt trauma, tumors, malnutrition, and finally, a brutal post-mortem recovery. Life back then, no Wi-Fi, no snacks, just pain. Luis Fernando Cavalos was 24, Alexis Rodriguez was 27. The two met online and after some chatting decided to finally meet in person. It was August 21st, 2021, a warm, peaceful summer night in North Bergen, New Jersey. You can imagine the nerves, the excitement, maybe even a little spark. Their first date went well, at least well enough that Luis offered to drive Alexis home in his brand new 2022 Kia Stinger. But that night, filled with possibility, was about to take a tragic turn. Luis, clearly proud of his sleek new car, decided to show off a little or a lot. He began speeding through the quiet streets, pushing the engine hard, redlining it, roaring past intersections with the confidence only someone with a new toy and a bit of adrenaline could have. Just before 2 a.m., Officer John Nunes, who was sitting nearby, saw the Kia fly by. His radar clocked Luis at over 100 miles per hour. On top of that, he'd run a red light and was breaking a provisional license restriction. Nunes pulled the car over. In body cam footage, you can hear Alexis trying to take the blame, saying she was the reason they were in such a rush. But the officer calmly reminded her that while she may have influenced the situation, it was Luis who was behind the wheel, and it was his responsibility to drive safely. Nunes cited him for 3 violations: reckless driving, running a red light, and driving outside his permitted hours. But he actually showed some mercy, choosing not to slap him with more serious penalties. He let them go with a stern warning. Slow down, go straight home, don't do anything stupid. But the warning didn't stick. Just 13 minutes later, Officer Nunes was called to respond to a major crash nearby, and when he arrived on the scene, he was horrified to realize it was the same Kia he'd just pulled over. The car was mangled beyond recognition. Luis had crashed at high speed into the back of a tractor trailer that was making a delivery. The impact was so violent that the front of the car slid under the trailer and tore the roof clean off. The vehicle spun out and slammed into a wall. By the time Nunes got there, both Luis and Alexis were dead. They'd been practically cut in half. It was gruesome, devastating. Investigators later pulled the vehicle's black box data. Just seconds before the crash, Luis had been going 124 miles per hour. That's nearly 200 kilometers an hour. Even though he hit the brakes, he was still flying at 68 miles per hour when the impact happened. According to the report, the entire crash could have been avoided if Luis had just followed the law. If he'd simply listened to the warning he was given 13 minutes earlier, both he and Alexis would likely still be alive. It's hard not to feel for Alexis's family. Their daughter had just gone on a first date with a guy she met online, and that was it. One night, one decision, and she never came home. And honestly, it doesn't matter who said what in that car. The second your hands are on the wheel, you're in charge. You have a responsibility, especially with someone else in your passenger seat. This was a date that could have ended with a goodnight kiss. Instead, it ended in tragedy, a brutal reminder that driving recklessly isn't cool, it's deadly. We're heading to the Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, where, ironically, one unlucky soul managed to pull off the impossible: death by drowning. Yeah, in the desert. If that doesn't scream zero chill, I don't know what does. So, let's rewind about 5,500 years. It's the Neolithic era. You're a coastal guy living in what's now northern Chile, a place so dry it makes Death Valley look like a kiddie pool. But back then, much like now, the Atacama was brutal, blazing hot by day, freezing cold by night, and completely uninterested in your survival. Still, people made it work, especially near the coast, where seafood was plentiful and the ocean offered both dinner and danger. Enter our unfortunate protagonist, a man around 35 to 45 years old, buried in a round stone tomb on a bed of seashells. Sounds kinda peaceful, right? Maybe even elegant. But don't be fooled, this wasn't a spa burial. Scientists were puzzled. The guy had no obvious injuries, no spear wounds, no bear maulings, no Neolithic slips and falls. He just dropped dead, or so it seemed. Then came the microscopic bombshell: diatoms. What the heck are diatoms? Tiny algae that live in water. Not the seaweed on your leg kind. These are invisible to the eye, floaty ocean dwellers. And somehow, they were inside his bones, which, for the record, is not where diatoms belong. The only way they end up in your skeleton is if you inhale water so violently that your lungs burst. Water floods your bloodstream, and those tiny algae hitch a ride all the way into your marrow. Yeah, it's as bad as it sounds. In short, homeboy drowned. In one of the driest places on Earth, while living near the coast, sure, but still, the irony is thick. Now, this guy wasn't exactly thriving before the ocean claimed him. His skeleton showed advanced arthritis. His legs were worn down, probably from years of squatting to gather shells. His arms and shoulders were overdeveloped in the worst way. Clearly, the result of non-stop rowing, swimming, and chucking harpoons at fish. Basically, he was a prehistoric gym rat who never skipped leg day. But it came at a price. To make matters worse, he was also severely iron deficient. And why? Tapeworms? Giant, gnarly parasites likely picked up from eating fish that were about as cooked as your average sushi roll. So, let's tally this up. Back pain, busted knees, worm-infested guts, and a final breath that involved inhaling the Pacific. Oof, but wait, it gets weirder. He wasn't alone. Buried beside him were 3 others, another adult male, a woman, and an infant. All 4 dated to the exact same time. So, naturally, people started thinking disaster scenario. Earthquake plus tsunami equals prehistoric wipeout. Makes sense, right? Well, not quite. The other 3 skeletons, no diatoms, not even a trace, which means they did not drown. So much for the tsunami theory. The current thinking is this: our guy drowned, maybe while diving for shellfish. The others? They died around the same time, maybe even the same day, but from something else entirely. Dehydration, exposure, illness, or maybe just life being the worst. So, to wrap it up, one overworked fisherman with a tapeworm and crumbling joints drowns in the ocean, in the middle of the driest desert on Earth, while 3 companions drop dead nearby from unrelated causes. It's basically a 5,000-year-old group project from hell, and one mystery no one's figured out yet. And next time you're at the beach thinking, I could totally live here. Remember, this guy probably thought the same thing, until the ocean quite literally dragged him under. In April 2016, 40-year-old Ingrid Line, a dedicated nurse and mother of 3 from Renton, Washington, was searching for a new beginning after her recent divorce. Known for her kindness, strong work ethic, and devotion to her daughters, Ingrid had focused much of her energy on raising her children and building a life rooted in care and stability. But like many, she still longed for companionship. Looking to rebuild her personal life, Ingrid turned to online dating, where she met a man named John Robert Charlton. The two began seeing each other, and on April 8th, they made plans for what appeared to be a simple night out, a Seattle Mariners baseball game. According to Charlton, they returned to Ingrid's home in Renton afterward, but what seemed like a normal date quickly turned into a nightmare. The next day, Ingrid failed to show up for work, something that was completely out of character. Friends and family quickly became alarmed when they couldn't reach her. Concern turned to panic, and soon Ingrid was reported missing. A search was launched, but just 2 days later, that search ended in horror. A Seattle resident, Mike Novation, made a grim discovery when he noticed several heavy garbage bags in his recycling bin. Through the plastic, he could see what appeared to be the outline of a human face, a moment he later described as haunting. Inside the bags were dismembered human remains, a head, an arm, and a leg. Police were quickly alerted, and it didn't take long for investigators to connect the remains to Ingrid Line and to her last known companion, John Charlton. Charlton was brought in for questioning, but his version of events was vague and suspicious. He claimed that after attending the game and going to a bar with Ingrid, he became so intoxicated that he had no memory of what followed. He even told police he had slept on a sidewalk that night. His account was riddled with inconsistencies and glaring omissions, especially considering what was soon uncovered at Ingrid's home. Inside her house, detectives found a disturbing and bloody scene. In the bathroom, they discovered a 15-inch pruning saw used in the dismemberment. Blood and pieces of tissue were also found, providing undeniable evidence of the brutal crime that had occurred there. Forensic analysis confirmed that Charlton had strangled Ingrid before cutting up her body and placing the parts into plastic bags, which he later disposed of in a random recycling bin. The case against Charlton quickly mounted. The physical evidence, his deceptive statements, and his erratic behavior pointed to one conclusion. He was arrested and charged with Ingrid Line's murder. During his trial, Charlton expressed remorse, but it did little to change the outcome. The court found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 27 years and 9 months in prison, the maximum punishment permitted under Washington state guidelines. Yet for Ingrid's loved ones, especially her 3 daughters, the sentence couldn't begin to fill the void left behind. In court, Ingrid's ex-husband, Phil Line, spoke emotionally about the loss. He emphasized that Charlton had taken someone who was never his to take, a mother, a nurse, a friend. Ingrid's death served as a chilling reminder of the potential dangers that can lurk behind seemingly ordinary online interactions, and of how one person's evil intentions can tear through the lives of many, leaving behind only grief, shock, and unanswered questions. All right, buckle up, because we're diving into history's first confirmed shark attack. Not exactly the first you'd want your name attached to, but here we are, 3,400 years later, still talking about one unlucky dude named Tsukumo 24. Sounds like a futuristic robot, right? Nope, just the name archaeologists gave to an ancient hunter-gatherer from Japan who had a very, very bad day. So, what happened? Back in 2021, researchers uncovered a human skeleton near the Sato Inland Sea in Japan. And let's just say it wasn't in the best shape. This guy was absolutely shredded. Like, not Jim Gaines shredded, but chewed up like leftover jerky shredded. We're talking 790 injuries all over his body. Arms, chest, abdomen, hands, basically a full-body horror show. At first, scientists were baffled. The cuts went so deep they gouged into bone, more like what you'd expect from metal weapons than anything natural. But here's the plot twist. Tsukumo 24 lived in the Jomon era, a time when metal weapons didn't even exist in Japan. So, unless someone invented time travel to bring a samurai sword back in time just to go full Mortal Kombat on this guy, something didn't add up. Then came the aha moment. Upon closer inspection, the wounds were V-shaped, eerily similar to injuries caused by modern-day shark bites. Combine that with the fact that Japan is literally an island chain, and the conclusion was pretty clear. This man got tag-teamed by a very hungry tiger shark or great white. And it wasn't a quick snack either. It was a full-course tragedy. How bad was it? every rib cracked or torn, chest and guts eviscerated, dismembered feet and a missing hand, yep, gone. What's worse, these weren't post-mortem injuries. He was alive when it happened, and he likely fought back, losing limbs in the process. That alone ruled out scavenging. It was a full-blown ambush, not some shark snacking on leftovers. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Tsukumo 24 wasn't found floating at sea or washed up somewhere. He was actually discovered in a legit burial site. That means someone had the decency and bravery to recover his mutilated body and give him a proper send-off. So, what's the theory? Researchers believe Tsukumo 24 wasn't solo. He was probably out on a fishing trip with others. Jomon people were pro-level fishers after all. The theory goes that he might have jumped in the water to haul in a catch or do some spearfishing, not realizing that blood in the water was ringing the dinner bell for a nearby shark. Next thing you know, chomp chomp, full aquatic horror show. His buddies likely saw it happen and pulled him out, but by then it was game over. Now, before you cancel your Japan trip and vow to never touch saltwater again, relax. Yes, sharks still exist in Japanese waters, but back in the Jomon era, they were way more common. Fossil records show a ton of shark teeth from that time, and even ancient artwork features them, especially tiger sharks and hammerheads. So yeah, shark attacks were basically the medieval version of texting while walking into traffic. In the end, Tsukumo 24 didn't survive, but he did make history as the unfortunate owner of the world's first confirmed shark attack. Not the legacy anyone dreams of, but hey, at least he didn't get taken out by something boring like food poisoning. On March 30th, 2016, in Sydney, Australia, Keith Collins, a 53-year-old businessman, was ready to begin a fresh chapter in his life, hopeful for love and new beginnings. Just days earlier, he had connected with a woman on Tinder, the popular dating app. Their conversations had flowed easily, and they decided to meet face-to-face. That evening was meant to be a simple, joyful first date. Keith was recently separated from his long-term partner and eager to move forward. The woman he met was Jovi Pillapil, 39, a mother of 3 and deputy director of nursing at Uniting Aged Care. They bonded over shared values, especially their dedication to their children. Keith was a father of 4 and a stepfather to 3 more. On that night, the couple met for dinner at Kangnam BBQ, a bustling restaurant inside Westfield Hornsby, a suburb north of Sydney. It was around 9:30 p.m., and the place was packed with diners enjoying their evening. But the night would soon turn into a nightmare. A man entered the restaurant, 45-year-old Alexander Villaluna, dressed in military-style clothing and exuding a menacing presence. Villaluna was Jovi's estranged ex-husband, a man with a history of stalking, abuse, and threats directed at her. That evening, he had been desperately searching for Jovi, contacting her family and workplace in an attempt to find her. Finally, his search ended at the crowded restaurant, where he spotted Jovi and Keith. Driven by jealousy and rage, Villaluna made his way to their table. Without warning, he confronted Keith from behind, demanding to know what he was doing with his wife. Then, horrifyingly, Villaluna pulled out a hunting knife. In front of shocked diners, he plunged the blade deep into Keith's neck and collarbone, then continued stabbing him repeatedly, targeting his neck and stomach with brutal relentlessness. During the chaos, Jovi tried to get up and defend herself. Villaluna immediately turned his fury towards her, slashing her arm and stabbing her in the abdomen. Then, horrifyingly, he returned to Keith, who was already gravely wounded. Keith summoned every last ounce of strength to crawl away from the attacker. But Villaluna pinned him down, pressing his knee on Keith as he stabbed him over and over until Keith stopped moving. Witnesses described the attack as terrifyingly calm and methodical, a brutal assault carried out with chilling composure. In the aftermath, a badly injured Jovi managed to escape and find refuge in a nearby shop. Meanwhile, Villaluna, covered in blood and still clutching his knife, walked calmly through the terrified crowd. There was no sign of remorse or panic, just eerie composure. He even sat by a fountain and reportedly called Jovi's daughter, calmly admitting he thought he had killed the man and stabbed Jovi as well. Police arrived quickly. Officers confronted Villaluna, with one brandishing a taser. Footage from the scene shows Villaluna surrendering peacefully, hands covered in blood. Emergency responders rushed Jovi to Royal North Shore Hospital, where she underwent surgery for multiple wounds, including a punctured sternum. Sadly, nothing could save Keith Collins. He died from his injuries. Keith was remembered by friends, family, and the community as a generous and well-liked man. As managing director of Elite Packaging Solutions in West Gosford, he was a respected businessman. Beyond that, he was deeply committed to youth sports, serving as president and junior coach of the Terrigal-Wamberall Sharks Junior Rugby League Club. He often employed young players and sponsored local teams, inspiring many with his kindness and leadership. His death left a devastating void in the lives of those who knew him. Alexander Villaluna was later sentenced to a maximum of 34 years in prison for murder and 12 years for wounding, with a non-parole period of 30 years. Picture this. It's 31,000 years ago. There are no hospitals, no Tylenol, no doctors, just sticks, stones, and a whole lot of survival instincts. You stub your toe and it's game over. But against all odds, someone in ancient Borneo pulled off a medical miracle that's still leaving scientists shook: the oldest known human amputation. Yep, before there were Netflix doctors, there were cave surgeons with sharp rocks. Until recently, the record for earliest known amputee went to a Neolithic farmer from Europe who had a leg chopped off about 7,000 years ago. Impressive, but not ancient enough. Enter 2020. While most of us were discovering banana bread and emotional breakdowns, a team of scientists stumbled across something way cooler, buried in the depths of a cave in Indonesia called Liang Tebo. Inside that cave, a skeleton, but not just any skeleton. This one was missing a left foot and part of its leg. Naturally, people assumed it had been lost in a tragic, "oops, I fell off a cliff" kind of accident. But then the scientists took a closer look and noticed something weird. The bone showed signs of careful cutting and, wait for it, healing. Yeah, not only had this person survived having a leg removed, but the stump had actually healed nicely. We're talking clean cuts, no signs of infection, and evidence of continued growth afterward. Let's be clear here. Whoever performed this Stone Age surgery was basically a prehistoric rock star. No scalpels, no anesthesia, just sharpened rocks and sheer determination. Somehow, they managed to slice through skin, veins, nerves, arteries, without killing the patient or causing a nasty infection. In fact, modern studies say that even today, about 40% of major amputations can get infected. So, yeah, score 1 for caveman medicine. The person who got the chop, they were likely a child at the time, based on the size of the remaining leg, but grew up into a young adult and lived for years after the operation, possibly even a decade. They eventually died in their 20s from something totally unrelated. Aliens? Saber-toothed tigers? Who knows? But their leg clearly wasn't the thing that took them out. So, what happened to the leg in the first place? Well, the cave sits in a ridiculously rugged area. Picture boulders, cliffs, and all the ankle-breaking terrain you can imagine. Maybe our ancient friend tripped, fell, and their leg got absolutely wrecked by a boulder. Or maybe a rock slide caught them at the wrong time. Whatever it was, it must have been bad enough for someone to say, "Yup, that leg's gotta go." And here's the wildest part. They didn't just survive, they thrived. Okay, maybe not in the modern influencer lifestyle kind of way, but they lived. In a world where literally everything wanted to eat or maim you, they made it. They even probably had a squad who helped them out, carried them around, shared food, and kept them alive. It's one of the earliest examples of human empathy and teamwork, because let's face it, hopping through mountains on one leg isn't exactly a solo sport. So next time you complain about slow Wi-Fi or losing a snap streak, just remember, 31,000 years ago, someone had their leg hacked off with a rock, didn't die, and still managed to be part of a prehistoric friend group. Now, that's hardcore. On July 29, 2012, Wariana Wright, a 26-year-old woman from New Zealand, arrived in Australia for a 2-week holiday and to attend a wedding. Known as Ree to her friends and family, she was cheerful, intelligent, and deeply cared about her relationships and animals. Her life, full of promise, would end tragically after a night with a man she met on Tinder. During her vacation, Wariana met Gable Toast, a 30-year-old carpet fitter from the Gold Coast. Gable had a loud personality, and was known for recording his interactions with women. He lived in the Avalon Apartments complex, which offered sweeping views of surfers' paradise, often said to impress women. On August 7, 2014, Wariena and Gable met for their first date near his apartment. Their night started normally with drinks and conversation, and they eventually went to his apartment. As the evening went on and alcohol was consumed, the mood changed. Gable's habit of recording the date captured a heated argument between them. At one point, Gable ominously remarked how dangerous it would be to fall from his balcony. Wariena's behavior reportedly became erratic and aggressive. She threw decorative rocks and tried to hit Gable with a telescope. Gable physically restrained her to calm the situation. After midnight on August 8th, Gable locked Wariena out on the 14th floor balcony, a decision that would have fatal consequences. The recording revealed Wariena screaming and begging to be let inside, but Gable refused, effectively trapping her outside. At one point, he threatened her, saying she was lucky he hadn't thrown her off the balcony. Her desperate cries faded as the recording went silent except for faint screams. Trapped and terrified, Wariena tried to lower herself to the balcony below. However, intoxicated and unsteady, she lost her grip and fell to her death. After realizing what happened, Gable called his father, suggesting Wariena might have jumped. He then left his apartment through a back exit, ordered pizza, and wandered the streets before contacting a lawyer. His strange behavior, alongside the recording, made authorities suspect he was more involved than he claimed. The subsequent trial drew significant attention and division. Prosecutors argued that Gable's aggressive threats and actions had driven Wariena to such fear that she saw no choice but to attempt climbing down the building's exterior, leading to her death. Crown Prosecutor Glenn Cash maintained Gable's behavior left her no safe options. The defense countered that Gable acted in self-defense, restraining Wariena after she became violent. They claimed locking her out was a measure to protect himself, not to harm her, and that he did not intend her death. They described the tragedy as an accident. The jury faced a difficult decision, whether Gable's actions amounted to murder, manslaughter, or an unfortunate accident. After days of deliberation, Gable Toast was acquitted of both murder and manslaughter. The verdict left many feeling uneasy, with some believing justice had not been served for Wariena, whose promising life ended so tragically. For her family, the loss was made even harder by a legal outcome that offered little closure. Back in the Neolithic era, Earth wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Between hunting your dinner, avoiding becoming someone else's dinner, and surviving in a world with no Wi-Fi, things were rough. But as if nature's challenges weren't enough, humans decided to crank the pain up a notch with DIY brain surgery. Yep, we're talking about one of the oldest surgical practices ever discovered, trepanation, or, as I like to call it, extreme hole punching for humans. Let's zoom in on a site in France dating back to around 6500 BC, where archaeologists uncovered something that might look like a prehistoric crime scene. Dozens of skulls, 38 to be exact, with neat circular holes bored right through the bone. But don't cue the law and order sound just yet. These weren't casualties of some ancient battle royale or mass murder. What we're looking at here is early medical intervention. Sort of. These holes weren't caused by violence, at least not the usual kind. Instead, they were the result of a deliberate surgical procedure called trepanation. It's considered one of the first widespread forms of surgery performed by Homo sapiens. And just to be clear, no scalpels, no antiseptics, and absolutely no anesthesia. Just stone tools, shaky hands, and a whole lot of pain tolerance. Trepanation involved scraping or drilling a hole into the human skull, presumably while the patient was still very much alive. And although the idea of someone coming at your head with a sharpened flint tool sounds like a horror movie setup, the practice was surprisingly common. Across multiple archaeological sites, including the one in France, trepanation appears to have been all the rage. In fact, some studies suggest up to 10% of Neolithic people underwent the procedure. At the French site, a staggering 33%. That's 1 in 3 people walking around with a literal hole in their head. Now, you might be thinking, if it was so popular, maybe it worked. Well, not really. Evidence shows that less than 40% of those trepanned skulls had signs of healing, meaning over 60% of patients likely didn't make it. The top contenders for cause of death, infection, massive blood loss, or the surgeon just poking a little too deep into the old brain matter. And for those who did survive, recovery took months, with the risk of lifelong pain, neurological issues, or just being stuck with a permanent headache bigger than the one they were probably trying to cure. So why on earth did anyone agree to this? The reasons for trepanation were as diverse as they were speculative. Some think it was done to release evil spirits, ancient brain exorcism, anyone? While others suggest it was used to treat head injuries, fairly common in a time when clubs and rocks were the primary dispute resolution tools. It may have also been used to ease epilepsy, migraines, or even psychological conditions. Basically, if your head hurt, someone's solution was to drill a hole in it and hope for the best. Honestly, if you were alive back then, the smartest move was probably to keep your headaches to yourself. Interestingly, people of all ages were trepanned. Kids, adults, the elderly, no one was safe. And while the tools were crude, think sharpened flint, bone scrapers, or even seashells, the results were sometimes surprisingly precise. It wasn't always a hack job. Some of these ancient surgeons knew what they were doing. Sort of. Even more surprising, trepanation never truly disappeared. While the modern version is vastly more refined and done only in specific medical cases, like relieving brain pressure, it's still performed today, only now with sterile equipment and an actual anesthesiologist instead of, say, a guy with a rock and good intentions. So the next time you think you're having a rough day, just remember, at least no one's trying to fix your headache by cracking open your skull with a seashell. Progress, baby.